talk, and that one of his books was about all these battles down there in Antarctica. That's what I want to know about.
Okay, well, that's a good place to start. So welcome, Tim. Thank you for coming on our show.
Why, thank you very much, Janet and Sasha. It's a great pleasure to be with you tonight.
Yeah, we're really fortunate that you decided to come on our show tonight. And I guess a good place to start is the Hollow Earth and Admiral-Byrd, since that's what is the book that you wrote based on that material? What's that called again?
Well, it's called Admiral-Byrd's Secret Journey Beyond the Poles, and it talks about there was a samizdat that circulated. Oh gosh, probably it started sometime in the 1960s. That it was called Admiral-Byrd's Lost Diary, Admiral-Byrd's Secret Diary. It's probably maybe 10 pages at the most. In fact, Timothy Green Beckley's Interlight Global Communications publishing company has had it published for a number of years now. But I took an interest in that manuscript because it stated that in 1947, Admiral-Byrd made a secret flight across the northern polar regions, along with his radio operator. And after a certain point, they started running across land, islands, and things like that, where supposedly there wasn't anything. I mean, after a certain point, you run out of land, up north, and it's all just ice. But they said that they saw land, and they saw forest, and some reports even say that that he saw like woolly mammoths and creatures like that, and then they were intercepted by a group of flying discs, and their radio was taken over by an outside communication, and they were instructed to follow the disc, and they proceeded to follow the disc, and apparently they journeyed inside to the hollow Earth through what is known as the northern polar opening, which, according to the hollow Earth mythologies, there are openings at both the North and South Pole. And the manuscript continues that they landed in an ice-free area that and were escorted to a grand city, where they met with representatives of the inner Earth population, and they basically were instructed. And it's pretty fascinating because the story sounds an awful lot like the early UFO contactee experiences. People like George Adamski and Howard Menger. They were told that the surface people, had to give up their warlike ways, and they especially had to give up their atomic weapons, or else bad things would happen.
Right.
They didn't specify whether or not it would be, like the inner Earth people who would intervene, or whether or not Mother Nature would intervene. Maybe a combination of the two. And they were told that to take this message to the surface world, and they were then free to go.
So they were humanoid, and what did they look like? They were humanoid?
They were humanoid, yeah. I mean, they again, these people, according to Admiral-Byrd's secret diary, these people looked an awful lot like the Space Brothers, as the UFO mythology has them called. They were tall, Nordic, blonde hair, and not necessarily they all had blonde hair, but just very almost angelic looking,
Right.
which I mean, there has been theories over the years that that may be where the whole angel mythology came from, was experiences with these a slash extraterrestrial slash inner Earth people.
Right. So, do you think that they were perhaps extraterrestrial that decided to colonize the Earth? That's A. B, they were indigenous to this planet Earth. 3, they could have been Atlanteans or other cultures that disappeared from the surface and went inward. What do you imagine, since you've been researching this extensively? Who are these people?
Well, it's actually a lot more complicated than that, because the research that I conducted on this manuscript, and then research that I conducted with just regular history, showed that Admiral-Byrd was not in the North Polar regions at that time. In fact, he was on the exact opposite side of the planet. He was in the Antarctic region, participating in a secret military program called Operation High Jump.
Right. So, do you think he never went to the North Pole, or that was what's the confusion? Did he get to both of them, or?
Well, he had, Admiral-Byrd had explored extensively both the northern and southern polar regions. So yes, I mean, he had been to the North Pole. Not at that time that was indicated in his manuscript, though. It
sounds like he was covering up for the Battle of the Weddell Sea, where he lost a seaplane tender and 65 Marines.
Exactly. You're exactly right, and I've speculated that the lost diary of Admiral-Byrd may actually have been released to try to. It was like a disinformation campaign. This was something that was put out to draw attention away to what he had really been involved with, and that was the secret Operation High Jump, which was taking place in Antarctica, which was probably the largest military exercise that took place after the end of World War II, even though it was officially designated a training exploration type of mission. But considering the amount of ships, they had submarines, had an aircraft carrier, they had a huge number of personnel. It seems rather suspicious that they would gather all of this at that time, especially, like I said, this was, around early 1940, late 1946, early 1947.
This was a terrible defeat, an utter, total wipeout of American forces, and we thought we had no chance against these craft that could zip in and out at all kinds of angles and just obliterate our planes and our ships.
The mission was supposed to last 6 months. It lasted less than 6 weeks. So something definitely happened that sent them packing fairly quickly. When Admiral-Byrd came back to the United States, he was secretly debriefed, and then actually gave a talk in front of Congress where supposedly he said that all countries need to be vigilant because of the possibility of missiles, as he put them, coming over the polar regions and attacking the countries. And,
wow.
He didn't. He didn't specify whether that we had to be careful of Soviet missiles, Chinese missiles, or anything like that. He warned that all the countries had to watch out for attacks coming over the northern and southern regions. And he, I mean, you're talking, this was a guy, I mean, he had been in the military for years and years. I mean, this was a guy that was not easily spooked, yet he obviously was. And he told a couple of reporters who were on the mission. They were South American reporters. I can't remember now exactly what countries that they were from. But I mean, he told them that what had happened there in Antarctica with Operation High Jump was something that was going to have long-lasting implications for the entire world. And I don't think it's a coincidence that not too long afterwards, starting in June and July 1947, that we saw the first emergence of what we now know as the modern UFO phenomena. And then around July 4th, we had the crash at Roswell, which some.
Go
ahead.
Len Kasdan had said that at one point, Byrd had even told the Congress, that we should consider, or the president was considering, nuking Antarctica. That's how desperate it was, and I think you're so right. It's what happened in Roswell is what turned the whole situation around.
Right. Well, nowadays, and I'm not going to say that the UFO phenomena is completely one thing or the other, because right now, if people believe in the UFO phenomena, it's either that they're entirely extraterrestrials, nuts and bolts craft, or entirely this, entirely that. I think the UFO phenomena probably is a combination of a number of different things that either superficially resemble each other or resemble each other, because they are closely related. But I do think that at least some of the UFO phenomena, and you have to remember that after the crash at Roswell, the first thinking of the military and the United States government had nothing to do with extraterrestrials. They didn't even consider extraterrestrials. They were worried, A, that they were dealing with Nazis, or B, aircraft from the Soviet Union. And Nazis were very high on their list.
Didn't they have a captured alien at Roswell, so it was pretty conclusive that it wasn't human origin? They had Errol the Grey, and and there was an earlier crash at Kingman, right? Kingman was before Roswell. Is that right, honey?
Yeah, it was in 47. It was a few months before, but there was basically the engineering that, as a result of these either crashes or deliberate landings, is what made all the difference in being able to not be overwhelmed by the Nazi technology of these flying discs.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, and you have to remember that the stories of extraterrestrials found at these early crash sites did not surface until years later, and we're really not sure at this point whether or not they're part of a disinformation campaign. Or a combination of the two.
I have whistleblowers that have been on board the 47 crash, the craft, and it wasn't a crash; it was a deliverance. It was delivered. It was intentionally delivered. That's one of my whistleblowers. And I wanted to back up a little bit. So we're saying that this Operation High Jump was in, what year was that again?
1947.
1947, and the war ended in June of 45, right?
That's correct.
What was there any connection?
It was another battle
with the Foo Fighters of the World War II, or is this in the Nazi Bell? Is this all connected, or is this even higher tech, more advanced technology?
They are quite connected, Janet. There was they made bigger and bigger discs. They had one that was mounted with the kind of guns they had on their tanks. They blasted a squadron of Allied fighters out of the air with one of their discs, and just when Patton was ordered not to take Berlin, but instead to go for the factory where they were manufacturing those things in Austria. And they blew up the casing, but they sent the ship down to the Schwarzenland, as they called it. There was the Nazi base underneath Antarctica that was full of blue-eyed, blonde Ukrainian women and hardened soldiers. There were 4 women for every soldier, and they were going to make a new Nazi race that, as soon as they recovered, was going to take over. And if it wasn't for what we got from the extraterrestrials, we would have been mercilessly crushed by the Nazis, probably.
Okay, let's address that.
Well, there was at one point, especially when you're dealing with the Foo Fighters, where the Nazis were also caught by surprise because some of these reports were not their aircraft, were not their secret experiments. The Nazis came in kind of late in the game with their high technology aircraft, and I should add that some of the technology that they used to build their early flying disc and the research on the Nazi Bell came from purloined research done by Nikola-Tesla.
Okay, we're going to go to Tesla next subject, yes.
Yeah.
So it's interesting when you start looking at it from this level that it all ties in, and it makes far more sense than if you just take, one incident like the Roswell crash. It ties in, so I love it. Okay, so you're saying that they got surprised. So the Nazis had their technology. Do you know if the Nazis' technology was given to them by extraterrestrials, or was that something that they were inventing themselves? What's your research on that show, Tim?
Well, there's been stories that have surfaced that talked about secret societies in Germany that were around even before, the brown shirts started marching into Berlin. And we're talking about secret societies such as the Vril Society, and I think the other one was the Black Sun. I think was the name of the other one, and I can't offhand remember what the German translation of the Black Sun Society. But the Vril Society, especially, who based their name, on the science fiction book that had been written a number of years before that, which involved, oddly enough, a race of underground dwellers who had a very high technology. But the Vril Society had been conducting channeling sessions, seances, and the like, and they claimed that they had come under contact with extraterrestrials who were feeding them scientific terminology and diagrams and blueprints that allegedly led to the early development of the Nazi flying discs. Once again, at this point, it's really difficult to tell. Tell which of these stories are true, which are partially true, or which all is just a bunch of disinformation meant to throw us off into what really happened. Much like the Roswell story. I mean, we really can't tell anymore just exactly what happened. It's like I said before. It could be extraterrestrials, could have been Nazis, could have been time travelers, or a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B.
Right. It's all such a mix of all the different stories at this point. And I just look at it all because there are correlations, and the stuff that doesn't fit eventually falls to the wayside. And what does it matter anyway? Where are we going to go with all this? How does it serve us now, this information? So I'm reading, I did an interview with I can't remember who it was, but they were talking about the Vril girls, the women with the long hair. Are you familiar with the they're supposed to be the ones who got the information and gave it to the Nazis so they could build the anti-gravity craft.
Right. The Vril girls were always featured in the photographs having long hair, which supposedly was essential to
their power. It was like their power. Their
I suppose power, would be, a good way to put it. But it seemed to be a little bit more than that. I mean, they were almost ethereal. In the way that they conducted themselves, and supposedly, I mean, there have been some legends that have come out is that some of the Vril girls were actually pilots of these the early Nazi flying discs because of their abilities to. And I hate to use this word because it sounds so science fiction-y, but mind meld, so to speak, with the high technology that was being used at the time, because it wasn't supposedly it wasn't understood as completely, and the Vril girls were able just to get in there and do it. I mean, it's not like that they had, extensive training. They just already knew how to do it. But once again, I mean, we're left with stories that obviously have been infiltrated with more modern disinformation campaigns to try to lead us away from the truth. I mean, we do have pictures, we do have documents that have been recovered from those times. I mean, pictures of the Vril girls. We have documents that showed the automatic writing conducted during these communications with the extraterrestrial civilizations. So, I mean, we do know that these kinds of things did happen. But, unfortunately, with a lot of our history, as you well know, a lot of it has been obscured, for obvious reasons over the years.
It's all...
One thing that did happen with the Nazis, though, is that they were incorporated into the power elite right here in the United States, besides Argentina, but right here in the United States.
Oh, yes. Well, you had Operation Paperclip, which was the operation to bring not only Nazi scientists, but Nazi intelligent agents into the United States. And this was all done very much under the wire, under the fence, so to speak, because President Truman had issued an order that the United States was by no means allowed to deal with former Nazis. And all of these people that were brought in under Operation Paperclip were all former Nazis. All the scientists, all the intelligence officials, politicians, the bankers. I mean, they're a lot of the very high elite of the Nazi society was brought into the United States and very much infiltrated our society. And of course, just my own my own theory probably played a very big hand in the American coup that took place with the assassination of John F. Kennedy.
Okay, we'll go there too. I want to say back to just one more thing on the craft. They're finding that the Roswell craft, or that prototype, can be operated with telepathic abilities. So it seems like the people have gone in, including my whistleblower, and he was able to operate it without having any training. It activated somehow based on his psychic abilities. So the Vril girls, it's saying that they had extreme intelligence and legendary psi powers. So that, it just kind of correlates. It's interesting to look at how the stories match. and we don't know why they're matching. And then just one more thing is it's interesting how Granddaddy Bush was a Nazi, and then they end up being president. So, all right.
Well, you know that Colonel Corso, who wrote the book The Day After Roswell, that was one of the things that he said was that they discovered, I guess, fairly early on that the crash at Roswell, and he said that it was an extraterrestrial craft. But he said that it was almost like a living entity, and like it was alive, and that the pilots actually immersed themselves. That the two, like the ship and the pilots became one, and almost like a symbiotic type of relationship.
Right.
So wait, how does that work? How does consciousness plus Tesla technology make those flying bells fly?
Well, boy, you got me. I don't know if Tesla technology got quite that far when it comes to like what we were talking about, like a symbiotic relationship, between an almost living type of machine and its humanoid or flesh pilots. Tesla was probably one of the first scientists to do research on what we would now call field propulsion, or anti-gravity. Faraday also did some research on probably some of the earliest research on the cause and effects along those lines. And then Tesla picked it up and went as far as he possibly could with it. Naturally, a scientist like Tesla, and we see this throughout history. You can only go so far with the technology that you have available in your time.
Right.
So Tesla did as much research as he could and experimentation as he could, and then that basically was it for him. And we see this throughout history, where somebody will make a very important discovery, but then can't continue on with it because, their science at that time hasn't reached that far yet. And it's not until, 100, 200, 500 years later that science and technology catches up to these people, and the idea is able to be taken further. And it was the same way with Tesla. Now, the Nazis, once they got a hold of a lot of his research material that was stolen by the East Coast Nazi spy system that was going on, even before the United States entered the war, the Nazis were
How did they get to his material? Wasn't he? Okay, we have to back up a little bit.
All right.
Yeah. So, from my understanding, and I read one book on Tesla, I'm not an expert, but the book I read was saying that he was in competition with both Einstein and Edison, and they kept choosing Edison over Tesla, and so it was more than just that he was ahead of his time and the rest of technology wasn't keeping up with him. It was almost like they didn't want it to happen, and they were choosing to go with the energy systems that, like the systems we have now, which are based on fossil fuels, over the free energy systems that Tesla was presenting. Am I accurate with this so far, or what would you like to add or correct?
No, you're correct. Tesla and Edison were very much, competitors. When it comes to the modern day electrical system, our AC electrical system, Edison had developed a direct current system that he had already started building in New York City. And unfortunately, DC current has to be stepped up every half a mile or so. So you'd have to build like a small power plant about every half a mile in order to continue DC current down the lines. And of course, Tesla came, here this young upstart from Europe, came in with an idea for an AC motor that AC electricity, can be sent for hundreds of miles down an electrical line. And of course, I mean, Edison saw his money flying out the window because of that, and he didn't like it. And Edison actually went and had public demonstrations where he would electrocute dogs, and even an elephant. He electrocuted an elephant using AC current to try to convince people that Tesla's AC current was too dangerous to handle.
That was horrible.
Yep.
Wow.
And
so they had that battle, and then was well, we can get back to that, but I just had a question. Was he in competition with Einstein, or were they working together on the Philadelphia experiment?
Well, Tesla did not think too much of Einstein's theory of relativity. Tesla had his own ideas of how the universe worked, and he didn't think that Einstein, knew what he was talking about. Much along the same lines that Einstein didn't really think that the scientists who were coming up with the whole quantum mechanics at around the same time. He didn't. He said that God doesn't play dice with the universe. And so so you had three. You had a number of different scientists all looking at a different aspect of physics and cosmology, and saying, and they were all kind of tunnel visions, not realizing that they all were correct. That they all were seeing different aspects of the same thing on how the universe works. Of course, they didn't realize that at the time. So, and then, like you said, Janet, years later, the story goes that Tesla helped, along with Einstein and some others, in the early research of the Philadelphia experiment. But Tesla's participation was extremely limited because he was pretty old at that time. He had a heart condition. He had a few years before that, he had been run over by a taxi cab in Manhattan. Oh. So he definitely was not in the best of health. So he contributed what he could. He couldn't travel very much, and finally, at one point, he just kind of gave up and said, "I'm going back home," because he felt that the direction that they were going with their research was not going to be beneficial and would actually end up being harmful to anybody who would be close by to the rapidly rotating electromagnetic fields that they were researching.
Okay, and he actually didn't live long enough to participate even any further because he died January 7th of 43, and the Philadelphia experiment was August 12th of 43.
Right.
So he died, yeah. Okay,
he had passed away by then.
And he was 86 years old.
Right.
Yeah.
But to answer your question that you had put out a little while ago when we were talking about the Nazi East Coast spy ring and how they were able to get a hold of Tesla stuff, by the 1930s, Tesla had pretty much lost, well, not pretty much, he had lost all of his money. He was practically destitute. If it wasn't for friends who were helping him out, he would have been living on the streets. But But fortunately, he still had benefactors who who allowed him to live. I mean, fairly well. Unfortunately, a lot of his research material had been scattered and lost over the years. As he was forced to move from hotel to hotel, uh, a lot of his notes and paperwork were left behind. Usually in storage in the basements of these places, and a lot of times they were held by management as collateral until he was able to pay his bills. And unfortunately, most of the time he was not able to. And so a lot of this stuff was easy. I mean, it was easy for anybody to go in and walk out with it. I mean, these places weren't as secure as as they are nowadays. I mean, it would not have been extremely difficult for anybody to go in and walk out with this stuff. And I mean, and today we know that's true because a lot of the material that Nazi Germany had gotten a hold of were seized at the end of the war by the Soviet Union, and a lot of the experiments and research that the Soviet Union then conducted, especially during the Cold War, were based on the material that they discovered that the Germans had that they had stolen from Tesla in the United States.
Wow. So what kind of information did we recover that they had gotten from Tesla? Was it the craft that was developed, or was it?
A lot of it, yes. A lot of it was based on Tesla's research into field propulsion. It was field propulsion, his wireless transmission of electricity or energy. What is referred to as like the Tesla dome or the Tesla protection system, which would be a dome of electromagnetic energy that could be placed, say, over a city or any other location that would act as a shield against aircraft, missiles, what have you. There were sightings in especially Iraq before Iraq and Iran, before they were taken over by their current governments that were on the borders with the Soviet Union, of strange balls of light that appeared to be very similar to what Tesla was talking about in some of his research on these defensive type of electromagnetic weapons that were coming from the Soviet Union. And then you had the Tesla beam weapon, what we'd call like a ray gun or a death ray, what the press popularly called it, that Tesla revealed his research in it to a New York newspaper on his birthday in the 1930s, though he never revealed too much about it. I mean, he produced, almost like a little handheld, a hand-drawn description on a napkin. I think is what it was. But in the late 1970s, with a spy satellite, the United States took a picture of an unusual array in the Soviet Union that once the experts got a good look at it, they were pretty certain that this was a particle beam weapon, a test array that was based on Tesla's idea of a death ray.
Wow. Well, what about, there are rumors, there's a couple things I want to explore about Tesla. You probably might have some answers. Was he totally human? There were rumors that he was part ET, that, his birth was mysterious, or he might have been our first grid. We have them all over the place now with the experiencers and contactees, but what do you think about that? I'll start with that question.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I think Tesla was human. I think that he was a very special human. I think that there are periods throughout human history where, for whatever reason, you have great men who kind of like pull themselves up out of the muck and mire that the rest of us are entangled in, and show just what a great and wonderful thing the human brain is. That show us what a human being could be capable of if we just stopped with all of the just, and I hate to use the word crap, but I'll say it, just all the crap that most of us deal with every day in our lives. And I think that Tesla is a perfect example of how wondrous a human being actually is, and some of the absolutely great things that we are absolutely capable of doing. There are Leonardo da Vinci, I think, is another good example of such a special person who is able to transcend I suppose the animalistic parts, that control most of us, the majority of the times, and just use their brain to their fullest. And and I wouldn't say that it's impossible that they weren't also in contact with the the Akashic record, that field of information that permeates the universe, and that there are certain enlightened ones, within our species who are able to easily tap into that, and especially tap into that in a way that is beneficial for them and beneficial for humanity at the time. Because you have somebody like Edgar Cayce and the types of great work that he was able to do, especially when it came to medicine and healing from the Akashic record. And I think Tesla may have been along the same lines, that he was at times tapping into that record to give humanity a push, in development. Because I mean, certainly, if you look at where we were technology-wise at the time that Tesla was born, and where we were when he passed away, and then I mean, it just accelerated even more from there.
Right.
I mean, it's just, if somebody was able to time travel from Tesla's time to today, they probably would not recognize the world at that point. And, I mean, that's not that, in the whole scheme of things, that's not that many years ago. And considering just the absolutely astronomical steps and developments that we have made in that time, and a lot of it thanks to Tesla. It's just absolutely incredible, and I wonder sometimes, how often, these special people like Tesla, arise, whether or not it happens all the time or if it only happens occasionally. It's hard to say. I mean,
he just seems out of the ordinary, or he was able to access a greater part of his brain than the normal human being. Maybe his DNA was enhanced or slightly different. Because I remember reading that he could visualize something, imagine it, and then he would go do it, and he would get it in the first take.
Yes.
And that's very out of the ordinary. I don't know anybody else who can do that type of thing, except for these savants that are coming around. So he was born 10th, 1856 at 12:01 a.m. and he died January 7th, 1943. Sasha was born July 9th at 12:01 a.m. So I always had a connection with Sasha because he's a child genius. So, you still there, honey?
I'm still here, Janet.
What would you like to say about Tesla? Anything you want to add about Tesla? I have a couple more questions, and then.
Well, I think it's a value for our listeners to understand that they have an inner. We each have an inner genius, an inner innovator, a far seer, and we also have ordinary parts too. And it's from my perspective, it's a value to embrace both the extraordinary and ordinary parts of ourselves, and our contributions as a loving, centered human being to the circle of people with whom we interact. Maybe our contribution may be just as important as those of Leonardo's or Tesla's. That's my opinion.
Right.
Oh no,
yeah,
I absolutely agree with that. Yes, I mean, it's.
Yeah, didn't he have trouble having relationships because of his extreme eccentricities of being a genius like that?
Oh yes. Well, it's like you said. I mean, Tesla had this amazing ability where he would have these visions, as he called them, where it would almost be like a hologram, where he would see these. He saw his AC motor. He was walking in a park one day with a friend, and all of a sudden he saw this the AC motor appear in front of his eyes, and he could mentally rotate it in any direction. He could take it apart. He could put it back together again, and he had to stop and actually, like with a stick, draw in the dirt what he was seeing, before it disappeared. And he had these experiences all of his life, and I don't. It's difficult to say whether or not these experiences made him eccentric, or if he was already eccentric. I mean, we're all, we all have our eccentricities. But Tesla, as he grew older, his became more pronounced, and to the point where. He had always been rather fastidious anyway, and it got to the point where it was almost crippling. I mean, he had to have a pile, like a certain number of napkins next to him. I think, and everything that he dealt with all had to be. I think it was to be able to be divided by threes. So everything had to be, in threes. Like before he could go into a building, he'd have to go around it 3 times before he went in.
Oh,
yeah, and his silverware, when he would eat, he would have to have like 3 sets, or maybe it was like nine sets, because he could only eat with a utensil so many times before he had to set it down and start with a fresh one.
Wow.
And for some reason he detested pearls on a woman. There was something abhorrent to him about that. I suppose kind of like the same reaction that most of us have with like fingernails on a chalkboard.
Right.
He had this almost visceral reaction to pearls on a woman. But oddly enough. Go ahead, Janet.
It reminds me of what happened to Howard Hughes when he was elderly. He could only use a tissue 1 second, and then he had to get rid of it, and all kinds of things like that. I wonder what that is. Yeah. Well, that's probably what made him such a genius. But it as you get older, it kind of backfires on you and makes you really crazy.
Well, and the odd thing about it is that Tesla absolutely loved pigeons. Which many people consider them, rats with wings. So here we have a guy who, I mean, he very much a germophobic, and yet he would let pigeons just walk all over him. And he had to, he would go to the park every day, with bags of peanuts and feed them. And he actually had one special pigeon that would come and visit him outside of his apartment window. That he felt that they had like a deep, spiritual connection. Together. In fact, there was a book written about that called Nikola-Tesla and the White Dove.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah.
Well, what if on his connection, he's rumored to have some connection with the ETs. I think it was Mars, but I don't know if it was also the moon. And did he have any hollow Earth connections?
As far as I know, Tesla didn't have any hollow Earth connections. I've never run across anything in his writings about that, with the exception of his research into the resonance quality of the planets. Dealing with the his propagation of wireless electricity. His research showed that that the planet resonated at a certain frequency. I think that's now the Schumann.
Yeah.
Schumann resonance, but Tesla discovered that years and years before anybody else would acknowledge that. But now you asked about Tesla and extraterrestrials. When Tesla was doing his research in Colorado Springs, Colorado, in the late 19th century. He actually received from a radio receiver that he had operating at the time what he felt were intelligent signals coming from outer space. Now, you have to remember that at this time, Tesla was probably the only guy.
Oh, hold that thought. We're at the top of the hour, commercial break. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
Radio at freedomslips.com. We'll be right back after this message. Ladies and gentlemen, could I please have your attention? I've just been handed an urgent news story, and I need all of you to stop what you're doing and listen. Hey folks, Captain Nighthawk here. Do you have a favorite host? Well, imagine if you all having all the broadcast shows of 2013 to listen to anytime you want. Awesome deal, huh? Anyway, so stop by freedomslips.com and order the entire 2013 library of your favorite host for just $30. Not only do you help with the station funding to keep us on the air, you also help the host because they get half of the net on every order. Also, we have Revolution Radio's all-time favorite shows all on one disc. The details are really broad, so you'll have to visit the website and go look at the details yourself. It's, again, www.freedomslips.com/season2013.htm and get your favorites. First come, first serve, 7 to 21 days for delivery. Thank you. This is Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, where information never sleeps, including me, Laser.
We've got to stop them! They're going to kill us all! Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
studio for Momentary Zen with host Zen Garcia at freedomslips.com, the People Station.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha, and welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I'm your host, Janet K. Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson, and welcome back to our show. Before we go back to our show with Tim Swartz, I'd like to remind you that Revolution Radio is listener-supported, so please do go over to the donation button on the website right now and make a donation. Donate $1, $5, $15, $20. Anything you can donate will be greatly appreciated. And we do thank you very much for your donation. All right. We left off with Tesla and the extraterrestrials. Tim, are you back? Sasha, are you back?
Sure, of course.
Yep, still here.
All right. Let's. So Tesla, he believed he had made contact with extraterrestrials. That's where we left off. Okay, go back to that.
Yes, well, he received from his radio receiver in Colorado Springs, Colorado. It would have been around 1898, and of course, this time, at least as far as we know, there wasn't anybody else on the planet who was transmitting, on radio frequencies at the time. Tesla would have been the only one, and he certainly was the only one who had a radio receiver operating. And he told the media later on that he had the feeling that he was listening to one planet talk to the other, or greet the other, I think is the way he put it. And at the time, it was the popular notation that the planet Mars was the most likely candidate in our solar system to have life. And so Tesla speculated that possibly he was hearing radio broadcasts from planet Mars. And so naturally, the press had a field day with this, and unfortunately, years later, this was the kind of stuff that was used against Tesla when his backers were withdrawing their funds for his experiments, and then his enemies, would attack him. Say, like Thomas Edison was a good example, saying, "Oh well, this is the Tesla guy. I mean, he doesn't know what he's talking about. This is the guy who said that he heard Martians."
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, you gotta, you gotta be careful what you say. It can always come back and bite you in the butt later on in your life. But this actually prompted Tesla to, whenever he had the chance, because Tesla was a busy man. In his younger days, I mean, he did a lot of stuff that made him a lot of money. So even though he was not a money-grubbing type of person, unlike Thomas Edison, Tesla made money in order to further his experiments. On the other hand, Thomas Edison made money to become rich. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. So when Tesla had the chance, he did some further, Tesla did some further research along the lines of trying to see if he could pick up, other extraterrestrial broadcasts. And he did research on radio frequencies, like ultra high frequencies and very low frequencies, places on the in the radio spectrum that it would have been very difficult at that time to do transmissions of any kind, especially voice transmissions. And yet he claimed that he was receiving voice transmissions, on a lot of these frequencies. In fact, a lot of the stuff that he said that he was receiving sounds to me very similar to what we would now call electronic voice phenomena. Not so much the types that you're seeing on, like the reality television shows where people have, like the digital recorders and they're catching just, like snippets of, what could be words here or there. I'm talking about electronic voice phenomena that seemed to be more predominant, especially in the 1960s and early 70s, where researchers were using radio frequencies, especially on the shortwave bands, and were picking up, intelligent signals where there shouldn't be, intelligent signals. And in fact, a lot of these researchers, claimed that they were getting messages from discarnate beings.
Right.
Yeah.
The difference were discarnate or extraterrestrial.
Mm-hmm.
And I've watched some of the EVP YouTubes where they're getting voices from the dead. In fact, there's one that about Robin Williams that was pretty interesting. It sounded like him.
Right.
But
I've seen that one.
We know, yeah.
Well, and people, they tend to forget that, at one time that, people were receiving, whole conversations that were taking place on some of these unused radio frequencies that, not just, barely understood, words here or there, but there was an Italian researcher. I can't think of what his name was now, but he used a radio set array of his own making and was picking up like long discourses, from various discarnate beings, and a lot of times reporters and other witnesses that would be in the room with him were receiving personal messages that you wouldn't think would be capable of, say, a hoaxer someplace else on the planet, who just had a shortwave, or a ham radio array and was like doing broadcasts just to fool people. So, Tesla was seems to be like a very early pioneer into this kind of research, and what exactly he was picking up, and what exactly anybody who has continued this research over the years are picking up is still open for speculation. It's like you said,
Wow.
Some of these voices claim to be, discarnate entities. Some of them claim to be extraterrestrials. Maybe both are correct.
Yeah, we don't know what frequency we're picking up. I am a contactee experiencer, and I've also had a lot of experiences with what I call ghosts especially when I was a child, but over the years, even as an adult. So what I was picking up, I don't know. Were they ETs or discarnates? I don't know. Were they the Archons? I don't know. But you pick up.
Yeah, see, that's just it. We're trying to put this type of phenomena into a pigeonhole based on what we know right now or what our brains can understand. And there's a very real possibility that this phenomena is so far beyond what we are capable of understanding that we're basically, I mean, we're just putting our own internal reflections upon them, and giving them a made up face, so to speak, based entirely upon our own inner convictions.
Well, I wonder if anybody able to contact. Did you want to say something? Here, go ahead.
Oh, it's just the characterization of these different phenomena is what makes them stick together as a particle in a way. We are generating them by those thoughts in a sense, but it's a way that we can deal with it by making categories and then seeing how they interact. If we can embrace them both is the way it looks like to me. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh no. Yeah. I think that's absolutely correct. I mean, it's your audience may better be able to understand it along the lines of 200 years ago, people used to believe in like fairies and leprechauns and things like that. Now, I'm not saying that these types of entities don't actually exist, but I'm just saying that with their mindset of the day, if they saw an unusual looking being, say something in the woods that was small, glowing in the dark, abducted children, they would identify them as as fairy or the wee folk. Now, go forward to the 20th and 21st century, somebody has the same kind of experience. Well, they would say that they had been abducted by extraterrestrials from a flying saucer. So,
right.
Which is correct? We don't know. All that we know is our interpretation of it, of the phenomenon.
One thing we have found is that at every level, no matter how you want to defining the phenomena, there's an aspect of yourself that's receptive to it, and that said, yes, I would like to see the ghost, or I'm interested in having this contact experience. And even people that have been probed and subjected to unpleasantness will often, if you really question them deeply, part of me wanted to go for it, get into it and find out what it was about or something. There's usually some part of the person. And so what I'm saying is, if your listener is an experiencer, it doesn't matter whether your way of assembling it or thinking about it pleases anybody else or not. It's your truth, and it's your way of shining your light on reality, and it's worth just as much as anybody else's.
Yeah, they're finding that the contactees, there's a couple million that have been documented now with all this research over the last, 30 plus years, 40 years now, that there's some kind of contract or agreement that they've made sometimes before they came into the physical, into their current incarnation, that they would be contacted. So, the buck goes back to you, and it's not a victim thing, it's about the agreement. I don't know if that's 100% true, but I did have an episode where I was faced with it, and I realized, oh, yes, I had done all this by agreement. So that's what I think Dr. Lesson's referring to. I wanted to know, Tim, how does all this tie in with ancient aliens according to your cosmology?
According to my cosmology, huh? Oh, wow. That's a very interesting question, because I've been interested in the aspect that planet Earth has been visited by extraterrestrials for probably as long as planet Earth has been here, and I mean this was something that I read about as a pretty young kid. I mean, I didn't really become interested in this kind of stuff until probably around third grade or so, when I was kind of, I was kind of forced into it by a school assignment that everybody was given based on current day headlines in the news, and I was given there was UFO reports going on across the United States at the time, so I was given, I had to do like a written and oral report about UFOs. And after that, then I was dubbed the flying saucer guy. I mean, I was the guy who believed in Martians and things like that, and I could have cared less actually. And but the thing that I found interesting was that the same people who would like make fun of me, to my face in front of our friends and everything like that. After everybody had left, they would come back and say, well, I don't believe in this stuff, but my family saw, UFO, our house is haunted, what have you. And that's what got me interested in this stuff. Not so much what the people were seeing, even though that was interesting, the UFO reports and, the hauntings and, monsters or what have you. But the fact that here these people were having these experiences. The experiences were interesting, but it was the reaction of the people who were having the experiences that really became interested to me. And so then pretty early on, I discovered books about ancient aliens. Though actually it wasn't until quite a bit later that I ran across the first Eric von Daniken book. I was trying to remember who were some of the other early, there was people like Otto Binder, who he wrote for like comic books, and I think he did wrote for some TV, like old TV plays and things like that. But he was also a science researcher and was interested in UFOs, and he was also one of the first. At least in popular culture in the 50s, to write about the possibility that mankind was not entirely indigenous to planet Earth, that somewhere along the lines somebody else came to this planet and did genetic experiments on the primates that existed here at this time and created mankind.
Again, what was his name again?
Otto Binder, Binder.
Okay, I'll look him up. I wasn't aware of him.
Yes.
I just saw Daniken and Velikovsky in the 60s, and of course Roddenberry came about and was doing it in forms of science fiction, but we knew what he was trying to say. Yeah, but go ahead. Back to how you started. What year were you 9 years old? What year?
Oh my gosh, this probably would have been around 1968.
68, okay.
Yeah, okay. 60s, 67, 68, somewhere along those lines. Because, the United States, somewhere along those lines, from I think around 1965 to 1968, there was a resurgence of interest in the UFO phenomena. There had been a UFO flap, especially around 1965, but then you had the UFO flap that was going on, especially in the Ohio Valley area, and of course I grew up in central Indiana. And so there were a lot of news reports coming out, especially, southern Ohio, West Virginia, around Point Pleasant, which, later on, we found out the whole Mothman situation was going on there.
I was growing up in Pittsburgh in the 60s, 50s and 60s, and I remember when it was going around that people saw the Mothman, and we all swarmed down to the park, and everybody's running around trying to find this Mothman, and the newspaper came. And then years later, I was thinking, did I make that up? And then the movie said, nope, there really was a Mothman. Yeah.
So as a kid, I was seriously contemplating the idea that not only had the planet been visited by extraterrestrials, in the prehistoric past, but that the possibility that we did not evolve naturally, or even worse, I mean, for a lot of churchgoers, that humanity was not the direct result of divine intervention, and so I had to learn to kind of watch what I said around certain people, because you have somebody who just absolutely believes that everything in the Bible is true, and that there was a divine creator that waved his hand, and the humanity magically appeared on the planet just exactly as we are now. And here this young upstart would come and say, "Oh, well, there's the possibility that a long time ago extraterrestrials landed on this planet and did some genetic manipulation, and created a race that we now call mankind." Boy, that's a good way to get yourself slapped in the face.
Oh yeah, been in those documents. So, did you come across the works of Zecharia Sitchin?
Yes, it wasn't until quite a bit later. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to think. Probably maybe would have been probably the late 70s that I ran across Sitchin's work.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly just when his work came out, but it was I was already probably if I hadn't graduated from high school at that point, I was almost ready to graduate. So I mean it was quite a bit later that I ran across Sitchin's work and the whole thing about the Nibiru and the Anunnaki and stuff. I mean
I don't think he published I'm looking it up when it was published, the 12th Planet. I think it was in the mid to late 70s. Let's see, what year was it published?
Probably because it would have been the 12th Planet, that I had run across.
Yeah,
that I would have run across. So, but yeah, I mean, even before that, you had people like Brinsley the Poor Trench, who was writing about this stuff, and there was the French writers who wrote. Morning of the Magicians. Who is it? Louise Powells and Jacques. I can't pronounce his last name. Berger. They also wrote a book called Eternal Man, and I mean these were books that were written, in the early 1970s.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Now that you were finding, I haven't even found these books, so it's interesting to get a hold of them. 12th Planet was published in 76, so you wouldn't have found it till the late 70s, as it wasn't published till the late 70s. Mm-hmm. So you had all this information that was coming out about the intervention, mm-hmm. And so how does our cosmology tie in with the Nazis, ET, the Hollow Earth ETs, and the modern era in your idea, in your mind?
Well, it's naturally, there have been a number of societies and civilizations on this planet who attribute humanity's creation to intervention from beings from the stars, or if they don't come from the stars, these beings come from beneath the surface of the planets. Generally, if you look at most creation mythologies, it's either one or the other. That beings from the stars came down and created mankind, or mankind came out of the caves to the surface, of the planet. And the Nazis, in their attempt to embrace their twisted philosophy of being, the perfect race. They felt that if they could prove that there was a divine race of men who lived underneath the planet, that these men were the originators or the ancestors of the perfect part of mankind, which, their definition of perfect was, German Nazis and nobody else.
Right.
That if they could come into contact with them, they could prove their point, and also possibly, get a hold of technology or esoteric knowledge that would help them eliminate the rest of the bothersome population on the planet. So the Nazis made a number of expeditions especially to say Tibet, Nepal, portions of China that was up against, especially the Himalaya regions, in an attempt to find these places that would lead them into the inner world in search of, say, like Agartha or Shambhala, or some of these other mystical cities that supposedly were the home of these perfect men that the German race had descended from.
Well, wouldn't it make sense if the Bureau passes through periodically and creates catastrophes like Noah's flood, that perhaps some people escaped to the inner Earth and then they just came back up, or maybe they didn't come back up. Some came back up after the different catastrophes, so they might all be the same species. They just forget about, they're underground for so long, they forget about the civilizations up above and vice versa. Or maybe they have total awareness. We don't know what they know, except there are stories. There's a fellow that I interviewed that said that he had was part of that society. He was one of those hollow earth people, and they're much taller, and he came up here to the United States in the late 50s and took a human form. So we hear all these stories. But back to you. What do you think? Is that a possibility? It's not mutually exclusive, that it could be, some of each?
Oh yes, definitely. I definitely believe. Now let me take a step back here. The old stories that became popular, especially in the 19th century, about concerning the hollow Earth, being that the Earth was entirely hollow inside, with a small center sun, and that there were even oceans and continents on the inside of the planet, and the polar openings as well. That I pretty much, of course, I've never been there. I can't say definitively one way or the other. I doubt if that scenario is true. From what we know now, about the construction of the planet and stuff. Like I said, I've never been there, so I can't go and say that yes, this is absolutely true. Who knows? It could be. But my own personal belief is that it's probably not like that. However, I do believe that the planet is crisscrossed with tunnels and caverns, some of these caverns being extremely large throughout the planet. Some of these are natural formation. Others have been created by races, technologically superior races that lived on this planet long before we came about. And I do believe that that's true, and I do believe that there are probably races of humanoids, whatever you'd want to call them, that still exist in these places underground. There are a lot of mythologies. There have been a lot of people who claim to have had personal experiences along these lines. So I hate to use the word believe or believer because
Right.
that has a tendency then to put you in a mindset that leaves you incapable of changing your viewpoint when you are presented with new information, new better information, so to speak. So, I mean, I just say, based on what I have learned over the years, I think that it's highly possible and probable that this is true. I don't know if you're familiar with a gentleman by the name of Walter Bosley. He's written a number of interesting books, and
what's his story?
Well, he wrote an article for Fate magazine one time under a pseudonym, which I can't remember what that pseudonym was now, but his father told him that and his father was in the military, and his father told him that the craft that crashed at Roswell was actually an aircraft from an underground civilization. That at least that part of it existed fairly close underground near Roswell. And that it was his father's job, among some others, to take the survivors of this craft back to their world underground, and to try an attempt of to start diplomatic relations with these underground people. And he said that these people were pretty much indistinguishable from surface dwellers, even though that they had branched off from humanity quite a long time ago in the past. Probably maybe even before what we know of as the fossil history of the development of the Homo sapiens species. And so they wouldn't be classified as Homo sapiens sapiens, but they were distant cousins, maybe distant, say the Neanderthals or the Denovians that we've just recently discovered. Can
they reproduce with humans? Can they mate with humans and have children? Then it's the same species.
Right.
They might have a race within it, but they're same species because dogs and foxes can't reproduce, but apparently humans and the Alma, the Bigfoot, there's ways that they reproduced.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, well, yeah. I mean, that's the Native Americans have said for a long time, that the creatures that we call Sasquatch here in North America were very fond of the Native American women and would kidnap them often for the purpose of bearing children. So, I mean, despite the fact that, you're dealing with creatures that are, 8-10 feet tall and weighing, 700-800 pounds, covered with hair, still are capable of reproducing with humans. So, I mean, I don't think that it's a far stretch to say that a branch of humanity that broke off from us quite a ways in the past and moved underground would not be classified as human, even though from what I've heard from other people who may have had similar contacts with these underground races, there is a superiority thing going on where they feel that they are superior to humanity. And there's also the mistaken belief that there's the possibility that the technology that they have is quite a ways advanced to our own. And you have people like the late Mac Tonys, who said that may actually be a substitute. That their technology may not be that far ahead of our own. They just want us to think that way.
Right.
And I think that, especially when you go and you look at the early contactees like George Adamski and the rest of them, and the interest that these beings had with us stopping our atomic experiments and explosions. Now, they said that that the atomic explosions had a ripple effect that affected not only the solar system, but the galaxy. Which,
right.
which could be true, but there's also the possibility that these beings were actually beings from below the surface of the planet, and they were saying, you got to stop this stuff, and not saying the real reason why is because it directly was affecting them.
Right.
Because not only would we blow ourselves up, but we would blow them up as well.
So it seems like you're leaning towards the hollow Earth people as being behind a lot of our, interactions. But are they the ones that create the hybrids? Who creates hybrids?
Well, I think that there is. I think there's a good possibility that that we are also being visited by extraterrestrial races. It's like I said before. From very early on, I was reading stuff that was talking about extraterrestrial races, creating humankind, and that one of the reasons that that the majority of when people see occupants from unidentified aerial vehicles, that they're almost always humanoid. And so you could, if we are dealing with extraterrestrials, you could either say that for some reason the human shape is a predominant template all across the universe, or B, that we are dealing with beings that are our ancestors, that we are related to them one way or the other. And when I say that, I'm also including species that have gone underground. So, you could actually, when it comes to these situations, like you said, with hybrids and abductions and things like that, you could be dealing with not only extraterrestrial races conducting this research, but you also could be dealing with underground races doing this research, and our own people doing this research.
Right. Yeah. Which category do you fit in? I had a my lab which had A's and it had the Nordic, so mine was kind of very interesting. I had in 1996. We once interviewed a lady called Anne DeHart, and she said that she was in contact on a regular basis with a Hollow Earth guy whose name was Zora, and that's kind of like the name he has. He came up and he walked among humans, and he worked for the military for a while. Are you familiar with that case? Anne DeHart and Zora? Ever heard of?
Her name does sound familiar, but as for her story, it's just it's not coming forward just completely. But I've heard that there have been a lot of very similar stories over the years. Along the same vein, that the races that live underground are pretty much indistinguishable, from us. and
Right.
that and that it's not that difficult for them to intermingle with us. And of course, we've heard the same type of story along the other lines as well, that there are extraterrestrials who are very similar in appearance to us, with just some superficial differences that walk among us. There was a guy who was a remote viewer, one of the best, who, in fact, he just passed away not too long ago.
Ingo Swann.
Ingo Swann, thank you very much. He wrote a book where he talked about a government cabal actually hired him to have him remote view sections of the moon, and he discovered there was an extraterrestrial base there, and at one point. He was out shopping one day, and he saw a woman in the grocery store. He said that she was very striking looking. I mean, she was extremely beautiful, but she was dressed, as he put it, rather provocatively. I think she was wearing, like hot pants and platform shoes and everything like that. But
Great.
he felt. He just got the distinct impression that she was not human, that she was an extraterrestrial. And it was everything that he could do to hide his thoughts, because he had been under the impression, when he had remote viewed the creatures that he found on the moon, that they quickly became very aware of his presence there. And
they're telepathic, and they can tell when they're being probed. And if once you have been in contact with telepathic people, it's like you're activated, right? So, so he was responding to this telepathic communication coming from this woman, and she was probably trying to block it, and vice versa. Very interesting. So I guess we're going to go to the moon here. I have a couple of questions. Are you familiar with the? Well, there's a lot of YouTubes, and they have the city on the far side of the moon. They have the large spacecraft, and then they have an extraterrestrial that was found apparently with Apollo 20 mission, which was a secret U.S.-Russian joint venture, and they call her the Mona Lisa. And she was inside the craft, the large spaceship, and it had apparently been under attack, and there were other bodies that were blown into bits, because hers was the most intact. What do you think of all that? Are you familiar with it?
Yes, I mean, my own personal opinion, the whole Apollo, what was it, Apollo 22? Is that what it was supposed to be?
Apollo 20.
Apollo
20. The one
Apollo 20. Okay. I think all of that is probably a hoax.
What makes you think it's a hoax?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just the stuff that I've seen, the material on YouTube, and you have to understand. I mean, I spent many years in television production, very familiar with videotape processes, editing, things like that, and there is something about the look of this material on YouTube that just does not look real to me. There's, I can't, maybe somebody who is better versed in the actual technological terms, of this stuff, could give you, like a more technical reason, but just my own gut and eyeball impressions of this stuff that I have seen, it does not look realistic. It does not look real. They've done a good job with it, but it looks it looks like special effects to me. Okay, now
do you, despite the YouTubes, do you think there is life on the moon, and if so, what kind, and et cetera, et cetera?
I do think that there have been some very compelling photographs that have been taken not only from Earth-based telescopes, but from a lot of the satellite missions around the moon that have shown some things on the surface of the moon that I just can't. I mean, I cannot believe that they would be natural formations. I do think that there is very good evidence that there is something else on the moon. Naturally, now I think that more recent in our history, that a lot of this stuff is probably man-made. I think that we have, humanity has been on the moon for quite a while now, probably Mars as well. But you have to understand that some of this stuff has been seen for a couple of centuries. As long as people have had telescopes, they've been seeing strange lights, on the moon, and some other interesting formations. So I think that there is probably, at least two things going on here. I think that there is probably an extraterrestrial presence on the moon, or at least that there was at one time. We may be looking at the remnants of of bases and excavations on the moon that could be, millions of years old. Since there's no atmosphere. Right. Since there's no atmosphere on the moon, it takes a long time for something like this to break down. But a lot of the more recent photographs.
Well, how do you really know there's no atmosphere on the moon when there's all this hidden information? There may be.
Well, Howard Menger, the UFO contactee, he claimed that he was taken to the moon by the Venusians, and that there was an atmosphere, albeit a thin atmosphere, and that it wasn't over the entire surface of the moon, but more along in like the lower regions, like in some of the craters and things like that. But I don't know. I'm a kid of the '60s. I grew up with the the Apollo space program and everything like that, and I've had my own backyard telescope for a number of years. And if there was an atmosphere around the moon, you could see that even with a small backyard telescope, especially during eclipses and things like that. You'd see how the sun's rays would be, refracted by an atmosphere. So, I'm pretty certain that there is an atmosphere on the moon. But I'm also
the moon is artificial. Is it artificial? Is it real? Is it natural or artificial?
I think that it probably is a natural body, but it may not have naturally originated in orbit around our planet. To me, it seems to be an awfully huge coincidence that the moon is placed in orbit around Earth the way it is. There's no other. There's no other moon in the solar system that is the size in ratio to its planet than the Earth-Moon system. The Earth-Moon system is almost a binary planet system. The only difference is that the moon does revolve around the Earth rather than the two revolving around each other. But you look at the way that the moon perfectly covers the disk of the sun during a solar eclipse. It's just it's incredible to think that would be a coincidence.
Right. There's some kind of design, and then I was listening to, I think, one of your shows, and you were talking about how the moon, there's something to saying how the moon creates our tides, which makes it life and maximizes potential for life to evolve. Do you remember saying that on one of the other shows, or that was maybe was saying that? But it seems like you were just saying, how it just perfect covers our sun. And it's always facing away from us. What's your idea?
Right. Yeah. It's really unusual that only one side
Right.
keeps his face to the earth. So I mean that gives. I mean, if anybody wanted to have a secret base on the moon, the opposite side of the moon would be a perfect place. And if you were wanting to. And I know that you and your listeners have probably heard the scenario before, that the whole Noah's Ark theme could actually have been humanity and animals were brought to planet Earth by the moon. That the moon was actually almost like a giant spaceship, even though it was a natural. The moon is a natural body, but it was then utilized as a spaceship from someplace else, and that everything was brought here due to some catastrophe someplace else. The moon was then parked in orbit, at a perfect spots to orbit the Earth, with one side constantly facing the Earth, so that those who remain behind would have a good place to hide for whatever reason, from then the inhabitants of planet Earth. I mean, who knows? I mean, the inhabitants of planet Earth, may have been like the equivalent of the original, well, not the original, but the British convicts who were taken to Australia.
That is one of the theories, that this is a prison planet, and we're Botany Bay, we're the prison planet. I had an interview with Jose Escamilla, who got some original NASA photographs before they were taken down. He downloaded a bunch of them, and he saw the spaceship. That's why I wonder about those movies, because he actually has pictures of the spaceship before NASA, took them offline, and they didn't manage to erase them from his files. So,
yes. Yeah, I've seen his pictures, and they are very compelling, and Don Ecker has also done some really excellent research on the with pictures that were taken of the moon, and then the whole conspiracy of NASA and other government agents to suppress these pictures. I mean, going as far as to release only very low resolution quality images, to airbrushing out stuff that may be make people think otherwise.
They out. Well, to me, it's amazing that someone would take all that time and money expense to make all these videos for disinformation. Who's got that kind of time or energy or money to do all this stuff? And there's a lot out there. That's a lot of man hours. Most people have to work and earn a living. They don't have a lot of excess time to just sit around making thousands of disinformation videos. So you have to look at it from that perspective too. Like, what's going on here with all this CGI and everybody spending hours and hours making all this stuff?
I think a lot of the people who are making some of this stuff are wannabe filmmakers. I know that if I was younger, and considering the way that I was when I was younger, and I was really into video production and all this stuff, if I had access to the software that I have now, just on my little home computer, I mean it's amazing the stuff. And I'm not, I am by no means that knowledgeable, about CGI and things like that. But just the software that I have right now, if I had it when I was younger, boy, I'd be doing the same thing. I'd be making all kinds of fun videos to put up on YouTube to make people go,
Well,
but okay. Let me say this, though. Here's the difference, though. I would not put stuff up on YouTube and say, yes, this is an actual UFO that I photographed, that I videotaped flying over my house, or these are actual secret government documents. That's where I draw the line. I mean, it's this kind of research, this kind of material is already questionable enough with most people. When you have people who deliberately make this stuff and try to pass it off as real for whatever reason, I mean, that just really frustrates me.
Right. Yeah. Well, and then what is the reason behind all this disinformation? What are they truly, we only have about 5 minutes, what are they really covering up? You wrote a book called Secret Black Projects. We're not going to get through all this, the evil agenda of the secret government. Mm-hmm. But maybe just touch on that. We'll do some of this in a future show. But what are they covering up and why?
Oh my gosh, boy, that's the $10 billion question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I there's probably just all kinds of different reasons. I think one reason is has to do with money.
Yeah.
For whatever reasons, there are some things that are being kept secret that, if they were revealed, would take money away from people who are getting rich off of them, off of these secrets. Take for instance free energy. There have been a lot of really good people who have come forward with free energy devices that actually do seem to work, and that they strangely enough, pass away either by accident, or they suddenly get cancer and die, or their laboratories burn down, what have you. I mean, there are people who are based in the petroleum industry that they don't want this kind of stuff out. So I think money.
Right. It would undermine their being wealthier than anybody else on the planet, and they can look their noses down on the rest of us while we're living. We're once many people are homeless, or one step from being homeless. Yeah, it's a great planet.
And don't forget, with wealth comes power. And I think that a lot of these things are kept secret because there are certain people who are afraid that they will lose their power, over the rest of us.
Right.
Political power, what have you. Power is a very big motivator for a lot of people. And then you have the religious aspect. There are a lot of people who, especially when it comes to the idea that there could be, other intelligent lives, in this universe. I mean, that goes and just smacks them in their face because they think it goes against their religious beliefs. That,
Well, the Pope says they're going to convert them all to Christianity. They're ready to baptize them, the extraterrestrials. So that's
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And I think those are probably the biggest motivators right there. Money, power, and religion. You got the big three.
The Illuminati? Do you think the Illuminati are real?
They may not go by the name of the Illuminati, but I do think that there are, elite groups, on this planet that have been around for a long time that, control us, attempt to control us. Sometimes they do a good job. Sometimes they, screw it up entirely. After all, they're human too. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of world events are being controlled by, other groups.
Well, we only have 1 minute left. Would you like to tell our listeners how they can reach you and your books and your website and all that good stuff?
Oh, sure. Well, all of my books are available on Amazon. So, I mean, they just need to go to Amazon and type in Tim R. Swartz. They can always Google my name as well, get access to, everything that I have, practically everything that I've written. You can also visit my website, which I share with Tim Beckley of Global Communications, and that's conspiracyjournal.com.
And that was
Thanks so much, Tim.
Thank you so much, Tim, for joining us today. Thank you, listeners, for joining us today, and much love and blessings and aloha.
Thank you.